The West End of Newcastle transformed from a place cluttered with terraced housing to a skyline dominated by high-rise buildings. This was a place continuously promised better housing and a better life, but it always came crashing down in front of them. The story of a community changed and destroyed, the history of social housing once known as Cruddas Park. Located in the Elswick area, a place in the West End of Newcastle, the Cruddas Park estate, now known as Riverside, Dene, was faced with significant development and change over the best part of the last century. Prior to the high-rise buildings that towered over the surroundings, there were back-to-back streets filled with terraced housing. It was the maps of Elswick from 1899 and 1938 that had helped to show the continual residential expansion in the area that had happened over 39 years. The terraced housing, described by many as low amenity slums, had rapidly filled any spaces that were remaining within the West End, as industry and population were both growing at this time. In an interview with the Chronicle Live, Laura Mayer, the Chief of Public Health in 1971, described it as the worst houses I have ever seen. However, this was a close-knit community, and to the Westenders it was home. Local historian Yvonne Young devours the reality of life in the West End during the 50s and 60s in her book Westenders, Memories of Benwell, Elswick, Scotswood and Arthur's Hill. Looking back on her life at Scotswood Road, Young recalls activities such as swinging on the clothesline, making mud pie, stealing rhubarb from allotments, playing kick the can, top and whip, and sitting on the step, watching smoke from Dunstan power stations across the river. All of which demonstrates the undeniable sense of community that existed in the Elswick and Scotswood area at the time. In addition to Young, co-writer of Whatever Happened to the Likely Lads and local man Ian Lefrenier wanted to put his hometown on the map, and therefore included this shot of Cruddas Park Towers in the opening credits of the show. Evidently, there are different aspects of the city's history that the two want to show. One looks at the terraced housing of the 50s and 60s, whereas the other looks at the high-rise buildings of the 70s. This shows that the landscape of the area was changing drastically, with T. Dan Smith's proposal to reinvigorate the city. An aerial view of Elswick from 1947 shows the rows of terraced housing that dominated the landscape and emphasised the prominent type of social housing at the time. However, in looking at an aerial view from 1970, it is undeniably different. The only continuity that remains is the Armstrong Vickers factory, but again, that would close indefinitely in the next 10 years. The streets of Elswick were stripped of the back-to-back hovels and replaced with high-rise flats in a part of T. Dan Smith's grand plan to create a city in the sky. The houses where Westenders had lived for decades upon decades, and the community had existed since the Victorian ages, was demolished along with the architecture. In an article by the Chronicle Live, the council's architect told them that the schemes will provide a new character for this part of Newcastle. However, the success of the project is not one that can only be demonstrated by the evolving architecture alone. It is the society that exists within that can truly change a place. Development to housing continued throughout the 1970s onwards in an attempt to address the growing unattractiveness of the buildings. In contrast, there was little done about the societal and economic issues that were rising simultaneously. Andrew McCulloch's evaluation of a community regeneration project shows that in this area in the 1990s, male unemployment was more than half, with car crimes and theft being significantly high. Evidently, these were issues that needed addressing, but instead the focus remained on the architecture rather than those who lived within. This mindset has continued on to the modern day, with recent proposals for a multi-million-pound regeneration scheme for 10 of the historic Cruddas Park Tower blocks. The promise included a complete redevelopment internally and new landscapes, with an additional promise that some may be able to purchase their homes or continue renting. This move would have been huge for the city and for Cruddas Park. However, plans fell through after private developers pulled out of the refurbishment scheme, leading to the demolition of 5 out of the 10 blocks and the land being sold to private firms. The continuous demolitions and redevelopment of areas such as Cruddas Park were carried out for superficial and cosmetic reasons, rather than to better the people that lived there. By spending all of this money on buildings, there is consequently some kind of abandonment of the society and people that live within those walls. Evidently, the focus needs to shift in order to create a community and homes for the people rather than for their appearance.